And an official hello to everybody. I'm Marley DeFrucio. I'm the Director of Operations for Level Up EQ, and I help Marla run the operational side of the business and also run the operational side of these webinars and events. So thank you for joining us for a panel discussion on the leadership success factor, emotional intelligence, aka EQ. I'm going to introduce our moderator today, Marla Skibbins. Marla is the founder of Level Up EQ. She's a master certified executive coach and a senior faculty member at CTI, the Coaches Training Institute. She's been training and providing executive coaching for 2 decades in Silicon Valley and internationally. And while also being our fearless leader at Level Up EQ, she continues to coach and she focuses on serving exec teams in tech and biotech. So I am going to hand it over to Marla to go from here.
Thank you, Marley. I just want to say something like this, in which we've been doing panels for several months now. It takes a lot of logistics to make this happen. And I want to thank both you, Marley, and Nicole Afton, because without the love and logistics that you both provide, we couldn't all be here to talk about this. So thank you, thank you. And I just want to say something about Level Up EQ, because we know that it all comes down to emotional intelligence, both of leaders and of teams. And that's why we came into being, is to support both teams and individuals developing the crucial relational skills that will create success, create innovation, create engagement. And I think today we are at a crossroad, and we need leaders that have emotional intelligence and high EQ in order to retain talent and create engagement and create an innovative, psychologically safe place to be. And it's not enough. I'm talking to you now. It's not enough for you to listen to these amazing panelists that are giving their wisdom to you. You have to think about, for yourself and for your organization, what will you do? What's next for you as a leader to become the next best leader you can be with people? So as you're listening, I want, like, this is the coach in me, I can't help it. Write down great ideas that will come from these folks that you might do for yourself or for your organization. So I'll get off my soapbox now. And again, we did launch the poll. Please fill it out. This is a casual, organic conversation we're going to have. This is not super formal. So you get to change where we go with the conversation by both putting in your thoughts in the poll and also by doing the Q&A. So please, please, please be a part of the conversation and make it relevant for you. And now to our amazing panelists, because these folks are amazing, and I'm gonna leave it to them to introduce themselves. And Gabriella, why don't we start with you?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gabriella Enriquez. I'm the Chief People Officer, Global Chief People Officer for Accelerate. We're the largest pure play automation service company here in corporate, headquartered in the US, but we are global now. I have over 10 years of global talent experience and a proud mother of 5.
Thank you. Scott, how about you next?
Hi, delighted to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Scott Day. I'm a Vice President of Human Resources at PayPal. It's the only company I've ever boomeranged to. I worked here earlier in my career and came back in 2018. And in my role at PayPal, I have basically 2 things that I look after. One is HR business partnering functions for our global product development and global sales organizations. So that's kind of the bigger part of my job. And then I'm also have been building the beginnings of a people analytics capability at PayPal. I've been doing HR in Silicon Valley, primarily internet enabled e-commerce kinds of companies since 2009. I've been working a lot longer than that, but that's sort of the latest chapter of my life. And I am a father of 3 boys who are all 2 years apart. They each go to different schools. And so I'm also, I call myself an Uber driver because I spend a lot of time in the car shuttling people around.
Thank you. Welcome. Tonya.
Yes, super excited to be here. My name is Tanya Tucker Collins. I'm the head of People Development and Experience at Twitch, which is an interactive streaming service that spans really the spaces around gaming, which we're pretty much known for, entertainment, sports, and also music, and a lot more. I always say, check it out. You probably will be surprised. And if you're an aunt like me who has a lot of nieces and nephews, they'll know what Twitch is if you don't know what Twitch is. So with that, my focus really for the last 22 years of my career has been in not just the HR space, but more primarily in the talent OD space. Currently at Twitch, I head up not only our employee brand, but also our experience. And then in addition to that, talent development, talent management, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's me, and a proud mother of 1 and an empty nester at that.
Oh, wow. Tanya, Gabriella, and Scott, thank you again so much for being here with your amazing and important wisdom. So thank you so much. So let's jump in. Here is my first question for you each, and jump in and riff off each other. I may call on you, but also please feel free to just jump in. What does one need to have to be an effective, well-respected, and successful leader in your mind? Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to jump in, perhaps. I'm sure this will unfold like layers on an onion, but to me, the ability to establish trust and inspire action, I think, are the 2 traits that I think are at the root of great leadership. And I think that those are enabled through my favorite term that I've learned in the last couple of weeks, human skills, as a replacement for soft skills, which is a very pejorative way to refer to what we're talking about here today, which is emotional intelligence. And Simon Sinek posted on LinkedIn this thing that I saw a couple of weeks ago that basically called out, we need to start calling these human skills. And I think that as we get into that today, we'll see what those are, but those are what enable a leader to generate these 2 traits that I'm referring to.
I love what Scott said about the human skills. I think a lot of times I say, just show up and be a good human is kind of where it starts. The things that I would add to that conversation, or this conversation in particular, is also an ability to step back. I think that's one of the things that makes a great leader, is really to take that step back and sometimes say, what could be different here? Not only for their team, but also for themselves. That's probably been some of the pivotal moments that I've seen in leadership that you either see with more awareness in EQ or even in coaching, is that moment that leader takes a step back and asks themselves, what could be different here for myself, for my team? And maybe I don't know everything. That humility factor also plays really large in great leadership.
I 100% agree. I think knowing when to step back and also knowing when to roll up your sleeves and play along with your team, right? I think a very, very big important factor is showing your team and leading by example, not just delegating and just letting them kind of do it and, watch them either succeed or fail, just really being in the play alongside, by their side, and really supporting them. And when detecting any sort of weaknesses or areas where to improve, really kind of being that partner and helping them, growing those beneath you. I think that a lot it starts from the top down when, from what I've seen, a lot of executives were so focused on the numbers and the business strategy that we lose focus a little bit sometimes on that human factor, and that is so crucial for that, right? And that's essentially what you need with EQ, right? Just that strong understanding, self-awareness, and being able to really identify to diversity.
Mhm. That's I want to riff on a few things that you've each said. So Scott, you said inspire action. And I'd love for you each to think about that, because I think that's really important. And when we get magic from individuals, I think it's when they're inspired. So what do you think what does a leader need on board, or how do they inspire people to their own greatness, do you think? And jump in. Tanya, you jump in if you have something.
I was actually processing just a little bit, but I'm thinking what has inspired, or where I've seen that inspiration show up the most, is when the leader articulates a vision, but also says, I don't have all the answers. And I need your voices in creating what I think is possible. And at the same time, I'm not 100% clear, but I'm going to paint a picture of where I think we can go together. I think that's also the piece of it. They're not saying go alone. They're saying, how do we go at this together?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of power and a lot of yourself that you're willing to put into that, because you have a vested interest, they have a vested interest. And more importantly, too, they'll also kind of sometimes reshape the vision as we're going along the journey. As I add my voice and others add their voice to it, as other leaders step up, that whole collective begins to create something that is truly magical. And I've seen it in my career. And I think those are the times when I say that's been the most inspirational thing. That's what late nights don't matter, because there's something bigger in mind.
Yeah, I want to underline what you said, which is I don't have all the answers. I think when leaders show up in their transparency and their vulnerability, well, it gives others room to step in and own their own authority in it, which, like you said, it creates this magical centipede of, wow, what can we create together? And the together place is when everybody leans in and gets excited about the adventure.
And that's the key. We lean into it. You don't stand and you're waiting, because there's a difference between a leadership that's on another spectrum, which is the authoritative, that then I'm waiting for you to tell me what to do. This is the true difference, is I'm leaning into it with you.
Right. And go.
I was going to say, it kind of goes along with what Scott was saying at first, is establishing and creating that trust, that safe environment where you're able to really host this place where everyone can contribute and say ideas, and nothing is crazy, right? Nothing is too outrageous. It's like everyone come together, pitch in, everyone's seeing it from different perspectives, and that's really when innovation happens.
Yeah, I want to underline that. You've created a psychologically safe environment for a team to be crazy together, because where does innovation come from? Crazy thinking that some people will go, what? But the what has a totally different thing come out than might have come out if everyone didn't feel safe or stepped back or waited for someone else. I think that's so powerful, so true. Yeah.
I would love to just, I wanted to underscore what I heard Tanya say way back in my career, where I learned a lot about leadership. I was an officer in the Marines for 5 years. And all young officers are taught about this thing called commander's intent. And the idea of commander's intent totally encapsulates what Tanya's talking about, which is the leader's job isn't to dictate how everything's going to happen. This is contextually in a combat situation. The leader's job is to articulate what the conditions of satisfaction, what good looks like. What at the end of the mission will the situation look like? And then empower the people under their charge to make that happen. And if there are guidelines that can't be crossed, this is where clarity comes in. Like, what are the conditions of satisfaction? What is the design, the do's, the don'ts, if there are any? But the more of those there are, the more it can kind of get in the way of inspiration.
Yeah.
The fewer of those are, the more you're enabling people to use their own brilliance and genius to adapt and accomplish. There's one other word that I would use, I think, in this in the world of inspiration, and that's belief. I think it's incumbent upon a leader to reinforce to the people on their team why they were chosen. We don't go out and spend time and money and effort to select the best talent we can to be on our team, to only then come and really wring our hands over whether or not they're able to do the thing that we've asked them to do. I think it's the job of leaders to continuously assert for folks, I believe you can do this, and to provide evidence, to be so in tune with what someone is doing, to be able to point to the things, because oftentimes it becomes uninspiring when you lose your way or you don't know for yourself that you're on the right course. But to have that leader kind of come back and reinforce that for you, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, Scott, you mentioned something that sparked it for me as well. Sometimes a leader can see, or well, a lot of times a leader can also see sometimes what someone else doesn't consider to be a strength.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed at individuals I'll talk to, and I'm like, you realize that that's a powerful thing you have. That's your superpower. That's something you should really lean into. And they look at you and kind of go, no, everybody can do that. And you're like, no, not everybody can. And that's, to me, also what great leaders do. You point out what everybody can add to the team and showcase it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm guilty of that. I can't see it in myself, and other people are like, you realize everybody can't do that. And I'm just like, no, everybody can.
Yeah, I just want to underline this, that as a coach, I see how often people don't do that for themselves, don't do that for their teams. And when they do, and so often people go, oh, really? Everyone can do that. No, like, people are hungry to be seen in their own like brilliant thumbprint. And when you give them that, like, that's jet fuel for them to go out and live larger into that. So I can't express enough, like, yes, thumbs up to +1 that from my own experience, for sure. I want to now dig into, Tanya, you said, I think, step back. And so because step back, when we're in the go, 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 do, make it happen, there's so much pressure to be in. What do you think it takes in a leader in order to step back, or what do they need on board to be able to step back? And it isn't just step back and look at the 30,000 foot view. It's you were saying step back in a lot of different ways. So I'd love to hear.
Couple, I'll chime in just because one is, are you really hearing your team? There's these moments when it's either resistance or angst, and sometimes it's even what's not being said. If I'm not hearing the voice of my team, that is the first area or time or opportunity I think any leader should step back. If they've gotten quiet, something is not being said. And it goes back to the safe environment of asking that question, what's not being said? And
I want to just, like, everybody listening right now needs to hear what Tanya just said. If people are not chiming in, there's a lack of safety in the space. And you as a leader need to get curious about that. It's so powerful. I can see you all nodding, and so true. How about for the rest of you? You want to talk about the step back and what it takes, and also when it needs to happen?
Yeah, I think Tanya put it really well. I would say pay attention to the extent to which you're setting things up where implicitly your expectation is that people will say yes to you. And that's a lot of words, but basically, if you're creating an atmosphere where yes gets rewarded and no is frowned upon, I think that you'll find that you'll get a lot of yes, and that inadvertently you're shutting down the kinds of things that you're describing, Marla.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of, it requires EQ to be aware enough of one's own style and sentiment. But I think that would be a place that I would encourage leaders to challenge themselves. Like, what are the message you're implicitly sending to your team?
Implicitly and also systematically, when you have VP after your name or director after your name or blah, 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 you immediately are a different human being to your team. And whether you think you're that or not doesn't really matter. You just have that impact and you just need to recognize it and have it on board. Like you're saying, you have an implicit impact just by your title. And people are thinking, are you going to fire me or not, at some primitive level? So if I say no, I might get fired, I might not advance. And so you really do have to create, like you're saying, that psychological safety. Yeah. Gabby, how about for you, Gabriella?
I think a lot of it really does come down to that psychological safety. Being able to be relatable. I think a lot of times when people see that title, right, they do get scared. And even though you're yourself or trying to create this safe environment, there's still that level of awareness, right? If I say something and somehow may come back to me, especially from an HR perspective, people are so afraid, to say things to human resource. They think it's really solely focused on the business, not really on the people, which is something that I'm very actively trying to change. But creating that safetiness and sharing your story, I think with people and kind of unveiling that title mask, if you will, and just kind of, you're human. A lot of time when people kind of come to me with certain things, I'm right there with you. I'm an Uber too. I transport my children all the time. I'm running around doing all of these things. Sometimes you just kind of need a step back and a break. I think a lot of this came to light with COVID too, and it just kind of made us forcefully stop and kind of consider these things that weren't so to the surface before. So
yeah. Well, and we just ended up having to be human because you're invited into my house now with my kids and my cat. And I think that's a huge gift that COVID gave us, is that we all kind of became more human. And like what was said earlier, I think being human and being vulnerable and being open creates that psychological safety. And Gabrielle, you're kind of pointing to that. And I just want to say, for this really comes down to me, that step back is the self-regulation. It's the self-awareness of like, ooh, people aren't talking. And then an ability to stop ourselves, and like go, okay, now how do I manage this to a more inclusive, positive outcome for everybody? And we really have to have on board that whatever it is that for you is self-regulating, that is a stopping, because without that ability to stop ourselves and take a breath, we aren't going to be able to step back. We're just going to be go, go, go. So let's go to our next question. So how do you develop or fine-tune leadership capacity? And you could take that either way or both for yourself, like self-revealing here for a moment. And then also, how do you do that as a strategy or tips and tricks for the people listening? Take it anywhere you want to take it. Take a moment to think about that. Jump in, anybody.
Yeah, we've used this word a couple of times. I mean, the older I get and the more I work with leaders, this word human, like like if you think about how you would respond to a child or a mother or someone in need that you see on the side of the street, these are all inherent human capacities that we have to be compassionate, to be empathetic, to look outside ourselves. And a lot of times we might miss those because we're so focused internally on what we're going toward. So for me personally, it's a very rudimentary thing about like, so I practice meditation. This is something I know you do as well, Marla. And for me, it is literally stepping back from life. I often say I like to do this before I put my Scott suit on and go into the world. How do I open the channels to just be present and aware of what's happening? Because there's a trust that if that's the case, then any cry for help on a kind of global scale, but in a work context, any sense of need or what's missing, some of the things we've talked about becomes way more readily apparent.
Yeah.
And so I think it starts with that is going into the core of how open are your channels to receiving the human signals that come to us from so many directions. And if you can do that, then you can always layer on how to manage a budget. I know how to deliver project deliverables on time and some of these other things.
Definitely. I think also for me, it came and we kind of spoke on this before, just organically. I was raised this way, right? I was my punishment, if you will, was to sit down and take a hard stop and reflect on what happened. Why did this happen? What's going to happen next? The consequences and things like this. So naturally, I was just brought up with this, and I say it's embedded in my DNA to kind of do that. But then at the same time, what do you do with that information, right? Now you're aware, but then in the moment, what do you do with that? So I think a lot of it, and this is another side of COVID that really kind of softened and helped, is that people are now reaching out, and I've seen it reaching out through LinkedIn. Hey, listen, I'm looking at this career, I'm looking at this. What are your insights? Can you help me sort of get a little bit more? And people are kind of reaching out to each other, more of a community. And I absolutely love that. And I think that is crucial. That's something that people should all do. Reach out to people and ask for advice and how did they come about and how did they get to where they are? It'll really help you grow. And kind of give you at least a direction, sort of different ideas of how different people did it, and then you find your own path.
Yeah. I love that.
Leadership is a journey. I think that's the first thing everyone has to understand. There were, I'll call them rules of engagement, or different things that you see or you observe or that you take on through this journey. COVID, I think, has completely shifted all that. So I look at what was required for capacity 2 years ago in leadership and what's required today. And it is like, I'm on Zoom. Why do I have so many meetings? How do I get more of my work done? And it's shifting like kind of the needs and the balance. So I think as a result of that, what I've begun to actually do is actually reach out more. That has been an interesting thing to realize. That is increasing my capacity. It's really asking for more, not just help, but putting more people around me that give me insights or even share their knowledge with me, or we can just troubleshoot. And it's like, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what's going on. And I think you begin to have that network around you, especially as you grow in leadership. And that's one of my recommendations that I've learned through my journey. You start out kind of thinking, I got this, I can do it. And it evolves to realizing you need to have more and more and more individuals around you that really help you, from either it be your girlfriends or whoever that might be that you need. To even just having almost like your own internal, we call it sometimes an internal board of directors, your board of directors, that it's helping you. It evolves into a coach, it involves into a lot of things. And I think you begin to you add these things that are necessary as a part of the journey, because it changes. Who I was as a leader, or anybody, I would say who you are as a leader when you started is probably really different, especially in the last 18 months.
Yeah. I would say, though, even prior to COVID, a lot of what you're talking about was needed. But we were so busy with the executive mask or the leader mask that we weren't willing. I think, or we were afraid, right? Because we were all in the colluding afraid instead of like, holy good gracious, how are we going to make it through? Which is what happened after COVID. So we have a question from the audience that I don't know what it is, but we're going to find out. Marley, what's our question from one of our listeners?
So kind of bouncing off this idea of developing or fine-tuning leadership capacity, we had an audience member reach out asking about embracing the humility and practical actions that can be done. Specifically, Jeff had even mentioned that as part of a workshop that they do with their leaders, they ask them to chat out, "I don't know," and then pause and talk about how that felt to see how freeing it is for them to do that and help them begin the journey on humility. So kind of in that same vein, what are some practical things to practice and embrace humility as a leader?
I think that's a great one. I haven't heard of that practice before. I think that's a cool one to kind of bring people's minds to the place where they understand what it means. I think for me, what works and what I encourage leaders is speaking from the heart as opposed to speaking from the head. So in other words, coming from a place of what moves you emotionally or what scares you, and so if you feel those things, but then you filter them out because you think of those as being not business-like, then that's your first sign that you're moving in the wrong path. And so I think a practical thing would be take inventory of where you are in an emotional state and start your whatever conversation, your meeting with a check-in or something that allows yourself to role model it as a leader, and then invite others to do the same.
Yeah,
That's very important. I mean, we've always said if you don't know, say, I don't have the answer for you, but I'll work at getting it for you as fast as possible, right? We've always kind of said that and kind of preach it to our folks to say that whenever they don't have the answers. But it really, you're right, Scott. You have to come from a place of just being human first and having those conversations that it's okay not to have all the answers. It's perfectly fine. Let's figure this out together. And then again, opening it up to other ideas. This is how I would do it. How would you do it? Or what do you recommend? And it's just more like that team, sort of oriented mentality as opposed to delegation or more of that, manager boss sort of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I would identify what does vulnerability mean to you first. Examine that, like what is it and what are some of the baby steps you would want to take? What things, we sometimes think like this mask that I have to wear. And I always say, throw the mask away and begin to actually be who you are, which is easier said than done, and realize, again, part of the journey.
Right.
But with that is also sometimes declaring to your team, like I always say, my greatest strength is also my greatest weakness. And I will share that very publicly with my team. And I'll say, so this is what I'm looking for you to help me with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, asking for help. Wow, to a team, huge humility. The humility piece is the vulnerability. I mean, that's just another way, right? And when you ask for help, you're being really vulnerable and open and human, because we all need help. Yeah, beautiful.
It also sends a signal to your team that they can do the same thing with you.
Yes, it's so true. Wow.
One thing I would just throw out, I learned this distinction some time ago, but sort of understand the true meaning of humility, because I think a lot of people associate humility with humiliation, same root word. But humility, if viewed as just seeing things as they are, really does help, because everybody has fear. Everybody has discouragement. Not every situation is perfect. Far from it. Matter of fact, most are not. If it was, why would they have us, doing the things that we do in the roles that we play? And so sometimes humility is just saying the truth of a situation as you see it, without any guard. And I think that that's just another thing to keep in mind.
Guard and judgment. Yeah.
Or a judgment. That's right. Yeah, just a matter of fact articulation of what you see.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. We have lots of questions people want to ask you all, and I'm just wanting to name what a rich I mean, humans are complex. Being a human is complex, right? We could spend a half day, 5 days, all discussing the nuances of being human, and I'm just so appreciating each one of your facet of what you see, because it is different and yet the same, because you're all different humans, and it's just so beautiful. So I'm going to hand it over to Marley again. And what's another question that's burning to be asked?
So this one came in from Natalie, that with the focus of EQ increasing in organizations, why do we think that more and more people are complaining about toxic workplaces, which is contributing to the Great Resignation? So rise in EQ, but also this feeling of toxic workplaces. I have an opinion on this, actually.
I do too.
I would first say psychological safety, and I would say safety in a lot of spaces, especially when we think of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Things that are not being said, a lot of issues also, I believe, also with trust. So you can say in one sense, this is the culture, and it all goes back to company culture. Company culture will shape toxic environments and allow it and reward it in a lot of ways that sometimes have nothing to do with what's being said, but definitely in what's being rewarded and what's not being acknowledged. So a lot of focus needs to be on EQ, but also on the safety elements, especially just allowing people to have voice. And that's not happening enough.
Yeah. Though I would riff on, I think partly why the toxic conversation is coming out is that maybe there's like this much safety that people feel like I can at least name that part of the problem is I have a toxic team, or we have a toxic team. So we're at least, because there's been enough of it said out in the socials and in the world, I think there's a tiny bit of willingness now to point them. We might not say my team, but we could say, hey, it's a part of our organization. What would you say about the question that was asked by our listener?
I think, and there has to be, it 100% has to deal with the culture of the company. It's really difficult to address when it's already toxic. Then you kind of have to like work backwards, and it's very, very difficult to fix that once you've let it get that far. You kind of really then have to break each department, each team, look at the leaders, what are they enforcing, what do they stand for, all of these things. But sometimes it's not necessarily toxicity, it's fear, right? A lot of people will kind of just say, well, it's going to be, and it's because they themselves are also fearful of these topics, and they fear losing control of where the conversation will go. So it has to be a very safe environment. It has to come from a very inclusively focused culture, and at the same time, although very open in communication, respect needs to be a very important factor there as well, right? Because we can communicate our thoughts, but it needs to be with respect, right? And And we have to come from a place of, this is going to be my opinion. How is it going to improve whatever our mission is? Again, coming from culture. But I'm not going to come at this trying to really forcefully change your mind and your opinion, because we have to be okay with disagreeing.
It's just so, I just want to go, it goes back a lot to what Scott said about the human, like, and thinking about, who do I have in front of me? What are their circumstances? What happened to them? Who, what terrible thing just happened yesterday to them? When was their heart broken? Like,
What's the story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say it. I was told a long time ago that I should never say the love word in the context of business. And yet it really does come down to being, I'm not romantically in love with my clients or my team, but can I have love for them? Can I see their greatness and feel inspired and have a micro moment of shared positivity about their greatness or their difficulty, So Scott, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead and riff on what they were saying.
Oh yeah, no, I think the premise of the question, rooted in this thing that we're all seeing, this phenomenon that's now being called the Great Resignation, it feels to me a little bit like a global midlife crisis where everybody is taking stock, because we've all just been through this traumatic experience. We're going through this traumatic, it's not over.
Yeah, it's not
experience.
over. Yeah.
The fact that this is how we're engaging with each other and have become quite adept at doing so. But what it really sort of says to me is that collectively, a lot of people, and hopefully more, are starting to realize what they're willing to tolerate and what they're not. And I guess what that indicates to me is that you can point to the culture and say toxic, and it may very well be. There's a lot of toxic cultures out there, at least if measured by the definitions that we're putting out there in this discussion, psychologically safe and so on. But I think a lot of people are feeling empowered at this moment. They're saying life's too short. I don't have that many more work years left in me to continue to be in this environment. And maybe it's not the most toxic environment on a relative scale, but I can do better and I'm not going to settle. Like, these are the things that I think are the empowering messages that are coming out of this Great Resignation moment. It's also, I'm not going to toil away for scraps anymore. I'm going to expect to be paid a better wage. And you're starting to see that this is happening. The war for talent's winning right now. And talent is raising the stakes and saying it's not just about the paycheck, but it should be, that should be fair. It should be transparent. It's also about what my experience, what my nervous system goes through on a daily basis when I'm plugged into this screen, talking to the people that I do, and I feel like I can do better. So to me, it's not just the culture, it's the, what are you, and what do you contribute? What do you want for yourself? What's your vision for yourself?
Yeah. I want to underline, it's this life-defining event. Often divorce, disease, death is a life-defining for people, and they go, what am I doing with my life? And this is just a global life-defining event. And so true what you're saying, Scott. People are, well, is this really what I want to spend myself on? And asking that, which goes back to, then we have to inspire people's hearts and minds, because they want to be inspired by what they do and who leads them. And that goes back to emotional intelligence, I think. Okay, I'm hearing there are even more questions. So I'm gonna grab one more question, and then we'll maybe dip into the poll that we ran. So Marley.
Yeah, I'm actually going to hijack for a little bit, because this is all going to end up tying in together into one big bundle. So one of our poll questions was around how important EQ is to leadership success. And 67% of folks said it was mission critical. 67% mission critical EQ to leadership success. But then you come down to overall in your company, how would you rate EQ among your leaders? And we had 38% at fair as our highest percentage was fair. Mission critical, but fair. And in fact, more folks at 18% said poor more than the 17% at good. Small smidgen of a percentage, but still we had more folks say poor than good. Now, why is this all relevant? We had a good question about from Susan. I love the idea of work human and see this as a prevalent quality in leadership now. What kind of leadership development do you recommend for organizations to build this kind of leadership? And it also kind of ties into our last question, what does EQ have to do with it? So tying everything together, leadership success factor, emotional intelligence, what does EQ have to do with it? And how do you, and what do you recommend for orgs to increase that in their leaders?
Tag, you're it. Gabriella, go.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of organizations have to look at what the company stands for, and really look at their people, right? What their culture is and what it is. So, for example, in our organization, my organization, I have a very open sort of dialogue with our employees. And obviously their career paths are very clearly defined, which I think is very highly important, right? You have to know where you're going and what you need to achieve the next level in your career. But at the same time, that flexibility to raise your hand and say, I'm not feeling as challenged anymore. I want to kind of explore something else. What can I do? And then having those conversations with their leads and their managers, and it not looking negatively upon them, like, that's what you were hired for. No, it's more of that open mindset. Okay, well, let's find something, exactly to kind of take care of that and really keep you inspired and passionate, maintain that passion that you came in, with. That is very, very important. I think it really shapes what we're talking about. And a lot of organizations as well need to look at leadership and soft skill EQ coaching for their leaders, and then kind of let that sink in and trickle down to their team members. You can't do it yourself, right? It's not something that I think a lot of organizations, especially those that define or people feel that it's fair or toxic. It's kind of like they're very focused on their technical trainings or just job skill trainings, but they're not really focused on the soft skills and the people skills training, and then how to apply it, how to check in. Because once you take a training course, that's, you don't just kind of flip a switch. You have to really kind of check in and take those pulse check-ins, have those dialogues, have those conversations, really collaborate with other leaders regarding that conversation, and kind of check in every once in a while to tune in, because people change, we're evolving. We don't really need to maintain this as a very high priority within the company structure, as opposed to, well, you kind of check that course off the box. I guess we're good now. That just doesn't really stay consistent.
Tanya, you look like you have.
Yeah, definitely a lot of our focus in the past has always been around, promoting or giving more space for individuals who have great technical expertise. And then we will then kind of shift to, okay, now let's focus on the leadership. And I think we have to really kind of begin to shift that a lot more and begin to look for, great, you're technical, great, you have a great technical practice and you know that. But now let's actually look and evaluate it from really the soft skills, the EQ, the self-awareness. Are you willing to do some of that work? Because there has to be a willingness there.
Yeah.
I think we all have seen leaders who are awesome technically, but can't move beyond that. And that's where they stall in leadership. And so that willingness to, again, start this journey and begin to unpack, like, who am I? Who do I want to evolve to? How do I help my team? All those skills that need to go along with that. What's that awareness that I need of not just the fact that I'm great technically and we can get to the result, but I basically killed the team to get there. It happens.
Yeah.
And now no one wants to work with me.
Yeah.
And I have a reputation of that. So how do we begin to help leader? It's that, I think it first starts really with that willingness of the leader to say, I don't have all the answers. I'm willing to do the hard work of understanding what I need to shift and change. What are the things that I need to do to create more harmony in my life also? Because it's not just about work. Your real life is going to come into this equation. So how do I create more harmony? And then am I willing to do the assessments, get the feedback, have the coaching, look at it 18 months later and say, have I shifted? Take some more feedback. Even, hey, I'm one that says include the people around you in those 360s. The best feedback I ever got was from my son. I added him as a voice in my 360 assessment, and he was about as candid as you could be. However, it fundamentally it shifted who I am as a leader incredibly.
Human. I mean,
to this,
go.
I was just going to say, Marla, to this point of human, I was going to zoom out for a second, because with where this conversation inspired me, a lot of times the case for change is predicated on some kind of life-defining moment, like you mentioned earlier, or said another way, in change management, we talk a lot about the burning platform. You got to jump. There's a reason. And I think the burning platform in the world of work is the fact that the more technical the skill is, the more likely an algorithm is being worked on right now to do it in place of a human. Just take a look today at the amount of automation software that's available to reduce the amount of labor that people have traditionally done in project management or enterprise resource planning or any of these kinds of things. Go out and read a little bit of research on artificial intelligence or machine learning. Computers are programming themselves right now, not in the future. And what's going to start to be separating the truly empowered human people in the workforce is their ability to be human and not do something that a robot can do. And so to me, there is an existential threat here that, if nothing else, is waking somebody up, which might be a bad feedback from a review that's given. That's good. It's good to get the feedback that says, yeah, you need to improve your EQ. But like for humanity right now, and particularly leadership in the world of work, I would start to really dial in on, like, these are the things that are going to be in demand and not replicable by technology. And so there is a burning platform right now that companies should be looking at as they're focusing on what is it that we want to invest in to separate us and have us succeed in the marketplace vis-a-vis our competitors. And so to me, it's a very clear-cut argument, but we still get trapped in old paradigms around focusing on the things that are less scary to us because they're discrete and they're not messy and they're less human.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I see it on my day-to-day. Obviously, as you mentioned, we specialize in automation. So I see it happening from our client's perspective, and then also from an internal perspective, how this technology, how it's all evolving, right? Right now, not in the future as people would think. It's happening right now. And I absolutely feel very passionate about that mission, because it really is taking these repetitive, mundane tasks that you would have to do, run reports and kind of like the same reports and generate and do all of these things. And now we're having that free time to really focus on our people, to really focus on what matters, mission critical. What is the business, where it's headed? What am I going to do that makes more of an impact, as opposed to these tedious tasks?
So I'm gonna say I want to keep going for hours, and we do need to wrap. So I wanna wrap by one. Just I'm gonna take away the burning platform. Is we got to jump into being more human, and that's our rally cry for organizations, and their definer People want to be led by people that are human. And I think they always did, but weren't encouraged to say that. And we're all in that life-defining event of COVID still. And oh, by the way, the question about what's happening with our globe, the place we live. I mean, there's lots of unknowns that are defining our moment in history. And so we need to really, really, really keep asking our teams, ourselves, are we being human? Are we treating each other? I loved if this was your mother, if this was your kid, if this was your cousin, how would you be being with them? If this was someone injured on the street, how would you be being? Being as human being, how are we together? And I just thank you so much for having people here. You're all so esteemed, and you are all saying it's about being a good human to each other. And that is what is going to define us in greatness in our organizations. So it makes my heart happy. And I'm sure there are people listening and will listen that you'll all give them fuel and inspiration for this shift that is occurring. So thank you for that. And if you're listening still and you want to know how human, how emotionally intelligent is your team, well, I know we had a team health assessment last month, and we want to offer this month. We have, I think it goes through November 19th, a how emotionally intelligent is your team. And it's an offer that is very discounted. We're offering it for, I think it's $9.99. And that's to find out how human is your team, and then give you recommendations on what you can do to shift that. So if your heart's called to take the next step, take the advice of these amazing panelists and go do that with your team. Go take the assessment. Go be a different person with the people that you interact with, because that's where it shifts, is with you. And that is what everyone said today. It's about how you are with your kids, with your directs, with your peers, with your boss. It's human everywhere. Not just the people that report to you. So, and with that, I want to thank you all. Again, thanking Nicole and Marley for your love and logistics. Thanking our three panelists, Tanya, Gabriella, and Scott. I learned a ton from your beautiful and heartful knowledge. And I just am so grateful that you shared with the group that showed up and with the people that will listen to this beyond you. So you will be having an impact by your words being recorded. And I want to thank you for that so much. So on that note, all of you go out and be great with people, because they're counting on you.